Welcome to Real Foot Forward, a West Tennessee podcast from Discovery Park of America in Union City, Tennessee. Today's episode is brought to you by Final Flight Outfitters.
Thank you, Zach, and welcome everybody to Real Foot Forward, a West Tennessee podcast where we explore the history, the people, and the culture of our home here in West Tennessee. I'm your host, Scott Williams. Okay, Zach, as usual, before I introduce today's special guest, will you tell me something you discovered this week at Discovery Park of America?
Yes, sir. So sometimes when I get here, Scott, I take a shortcut, or what I think is a shortcut, and I cut through the military gallery.
No, wait a minute. Before you go on, is that really the reason why it's a shortcut? Or is it because my office window overlooks the parking lot? And so used to, I could see people coming and going. Now, all of a sudden, I'm like, where are all the people? And I think they're all going.
I've always done this.
Everyone's going through the military gallery because they want to avoid me watching them. And I promise I don't look. I try to avoid my eyes so I'm not like, Rapunzel up here in this window looking down. Okay, I'm sorry. Carry on.
I promise you that's not the reason. But today I thought it would be a good time to go through there and discover something new. And so I checked out one of the showcases we have, and there was a deck of cards there. But it's actually plant recognition cards, and they were given to Navy and Air Force pilots to help them in case of crash landings. There's 57 cards in the deck. It contains information about plants that a pilot could eat to survive, or the ones that are poisonous. Very interesting.
Very interesting, and how apropos with our special guest today. We have Dr. Matthew Stafford, a retired United States Air Force officer, educator, and academic leader who, he has a long list we're not going to go over, and we're going to let him tell us about all this. But he's worked with nuclear weapons, planning and teaching operational strike plans, designing, developing, and delivering higher education programs, and running higher education programs. Welcome, Dr. Stafford.
Thank you very much. Glad to be here.
So back us up a little bit and share with us, where did you come from? Where did you grow up, and what did your parents do?
My father was with the space program, so he bopped around the country, and he finally landed in Huntsville, Alabama, where I graduated from high school. Right after high school, I joined the Air Force, and then I got swept up in moving around the world for 29 years in uniform. I was walking out. I had done some design work on weapons for Army infantry. I was going into kind of physics, which is one of my fun areas to play in. And the Air Force said, would you stay as a civilian? And they made me an offer I couldn't refuse. I stayed as a civilian and stayed another 16 years as a senior civilian and kept bopping around the country.
Now, obviously, Discovery Park is all about STEAM education and changing the lives of young people. I'm curious, what did your parents do that helped inspire the interest that led you to do all this? Were you homeschooled? Were your parents very focused on science? What happened at home?
Well, my father was a chemical engineer. He had worked when I was born. He was working on developing color TVs for RCA out of Marion, Indiana. He built airplane propellers for Hamilton Standard out of Connecticut. He worked with Hayes International and then Boeing on the Saturn V program and other space programs. He did air pollution control. My mom was a registered nurse. Between the two of them, we lived on a farm when I was really little. They taught me to read early because there was nothing else to do in the wintertime for the farm except read. So I've always read a lot. They've always directed me towards education. So I think they were a good influence in that regard.
And so were you a great student right off the bat? Did you take to school? Was that really important to you early on?
No, I was a lousy student. I resented people telling me what to think and what to do. And so I just tried to retreat from it as much as I possibly could. I was 15 years old when my then civics teacher looked at me, and she was reading a paper I'd written. I'd been called into her office for a discussion, probably for my poor behavior. And she looked up at me and she said, "You're smart." And we were both surprised. No one had ever said that before. But when I joined the Air Force saw something in me that no one else had ever seen. And they said, "You need to go to school." And over the course of my career, they sent me to school after school after school. I ended up with 6 academic degrees, but I've also got a lot of weird certifications and weird schools that they sent me to. And every time I told them I was going to quit, retire, go somewhere else, they'd either promote me or send me to another school.
Now, what you have like a huge list of degrees. What are they, if you can remember them all?
Yeah. I've got 2 in business. I've got 1 in aviation where you get to study crash. And I'll tell your listeners this: there is one explanation for most airplane crashes, and this should shock absolutely no one. It is gravity. Uh, I have 2 degrees in history, a master's and a Ph.D. from the University of Alabama. And my last master's, which was given at the tail end of my career, was a master's in strategic studies. I do strategic planning, mostly for strike type warfare, but I've also done it corporate and for federal agencies.
And then you're a huge history fan as well, correct? Which is what led us to talk to each other today. What is you think the role of your love of history that's played in your career?
History helps us to learn from the lessons of others. It's wonderful when we learn from our mistakes. It's even better when we learn from the mistakes other people make because we don't have to repeat those mistakes. Sadly, historians are a quiet bunch. They never want to step out and say, don't do that, or this will happen, because they don't know it will happen. History doesn't repeat, but it does rhyme. So they say it may happen, and that may gets a lot of senior leaders to not pay attention to historians. And then historians write books about, see, we saw this coming all along. But that's what it is. It gives you this experience. The second thing I'll say is at your PhD, you have to do an oral defense, and they ask you really hard questions over time and try to embarrass you. One of the questions that I was asked is, what compelled you to go into history? As a child, I used to read novels. I love Stephen King novels because they were frightening. Remember the early Stephen King novels, The Dead Zone and the one about the vampires and all that. Those were great books.
Oh yeah,
And
I read every Stephen King and Dean Koontz I could get my hands on when I was younger.
up until Cujo, because I just couldn't be frightened of a Saint Bernard. They had always scared me. But then I read Bernard Fall's book Street Without Joy on the French experience in Indochina, and it was the scariest book I ever read in my life. Accounts of Frenchmen defending the hillsides in Vietnam, and the Vietnamese soldiers coming up, climbing over their dead in the glare of the falling flares, and trying to kill these Frenchmen. And in the morning, the few who survived managed to walk down the hill and go back to their lines. It was scarier than Night of the Living Dead because it really happened. And it was scarier because you saw this angst that these people, and I realized something then that is repeated for me. History is not a complex word. It's HI story. And it is the stories that really grab you. These are people. These are real people. And when you start to get into their stories, it's fascinating. One of the most poignant things I've ever read, there's a book about Westward the Women. And this woman is writing about her move across the West in this old wagon. And she's pregnant. And one of her journal entries is this: woke up, baby died, buried it, moved on. Think of that. In 4 lines, she's accounting what might stop some people's lives, but not her. She's got to go on. She can't stay there. And these were extraordinary people who developed our modern way of life. And I think their stories are lost. So the historian is trying to capture those stories to bring it out to the public to say, hey, look, this is exciting stuff. And too often we teach history as a list of names, dates, and events. It comes also as a recipe. No one wants to sit and read recipes. But when you start to delve into those stories, they become exciting because they're filled with passion. They're filled with fascinating details.
I'm curious, what tool do you use here in 2025? When I was reading Cujo and Stephen King books, I was reading paperbacks, that were thick and hard to hold, and the print was really tiny. What are you reading now? Do you like ebooks, or are you on printed books?
I still like books. I'm very comfortable with books, and I have too many. The last time the Air Force moved me, they have to pay for your move. You can accept professional gear, so you get a limit, and then they'll say, but it doesn't include your professional gear. Because I'm a professor, my books were professional gear. My books were 19,200 pounds.
Yeah, that's a lot. That's the way my wife and I are. She's an art historian and she loves books and I love books. And so our house has a lot of books in it. We even had to, in one of the houses we lived in, not this one, but one house we had to have somebody come over and reinforce the floor because we had so many books. We
That
were
was
afraid we were going to lose them to the ground.
Our house is almost 100 years old, and before we moved in, we had the floors reinforced.
Yep, there you go. So you're living in Dyersburg. How
Correct.
in the world does somebody who's doing all the things you're doing and traveling around, how do you land here in Northwest Tennessee?
So I had written a policy for the chairman of the Joint Chiefs of Staff, and I'd written a parallel policy for the Secretary of Defense. The chairman signed and enacted my policy immediately, but nothing was happening on the Office of Secretary of Defense, OSD side. So I was coming up the stairs of the Pentagon, and I ran into the guy who my policy was sitting in his in basket and had been sitting there for a while. I asked him, was he going to sign it? He told me he was not going to sign it. He was afraid. He was a temporary appointee, and he was afraid that if the president did not like the policy, that he might not get a permanent appointment. I pointed out to him that it would save millions, make lives better for every soldier, sailor, airman, marine, and guardian, improve the educational quality, improve talent management decision making. He agreed with all that and still refused to sign it. I told him where he could go, called my wife and said, that's it, I'm done. I retire, find me a place to live. I gave her a list of 7 things. She added a couple, called me 2 hours later and said, I found a house in Dyersburg, Tennessee. I
And
said,
what
where's
city
that?
were you in at this time?
San Antonio,
San
Texas.
Antonio.
Although
Okay.
when I got mad, I was TDY and into Pentagon. But I we drove over 2 days later and bought the house.
So I'm curious what some of the things on that list were.
They're boring things. They were a nearby hospital, the median income, median housing values, the population size, the presence of certain businesses. So they're not things super exciting. However, I've been around the world multiple times. I've seen mountains, I've seen rivers, I've seen oceans. The things that might attract some people didn't attract me. I was looking for a place where the people were nice, it was calm, peaceful, and that I could my military retirement would go farther.
Well, and it's funny, we have so many people that visit Discovery Park and fall in love with the whole area, and their next call is to a real estate agent, and they move and retire here. My neighbors that just live 2 houses down are from Chicago, and they retired and moved here not knowing anyone. So a lot of people
Mhm.
are following in your footsteps or vice versa. It
Right.
is a great place to live, just the quality of life. And in Dyersburg, I love Union City and I love Obion County, but you guys have one thing we don't. And Zach, what do they have in Dyersburg that we don't have here?
Restaurants.
Well, what one restaurant especially? There's one in particular. You have
Uh,
little kids? Come on. What do your kids love? Chick-fil-A.
oh yes, I did. I figured you were going the Cracker Barrel route there. Sorry, but
No, no, no. Kids love
yes,
Chick-fil-A.
they
The
do.
only
I give
time
them
I'm ever
Chick-fil-A.
near one is on a Sunday. So, you guys having a Chick-fil-A, everyone here in Union City talks about Dyersburg's Chick-fil-A all the time. So, and you guys have a university there. I love the folks over at Dyersburg State, the great work they're doing. Have you made connections there and do anything with them there?
Occasionally, I've spoken over there a couple times, and I believe I'm doing a lecture series coming up. I think we'll get to that. I know that the Dyersburg community is sponsoring that, so some of that. I haven't really taught undergrads much in my life. Most of my students have been postgraduate students, so it's not where I spend a lot of teaching time.
Sure, no, understood. So, as you mentioned, we're going to take a break in a few minutes, and then we're going to talk about the Constitution and the what you're teaching there. Tell me a little bit about this work that you've been doing that didn't get approved, that resulted in you ended up joining us here in Northwest Tennessee. What all were you doing with that?
Well, the idea is if you're familiar with competency-based learning where you have a set list of competencies and people are certified on their competencies. And then from that, you have basically an inventory of knowledge, skills, and abilities with which you can go forth and find jobs or get credentials in academia or used for some other purpose. I'm trying to institute that within the military. The good news is it was adopted on the chairman's side, and they're moving. They don't call it competency based; they call it outcomes based military education (OBME). However, in 2022, I got a call from an assistant secretary of defense, and he said, "I want you in my office in a week. You need to start working." And I said, "Why?" And he said, "We signed your policy, and we're implementing it." So I negotiated the deal. I was having surgery in 7 days, couldn't meet him in his office, but I negotiated the deal where I could work as a consultant on the implementation of OBME, sitting on my sunny porch here in Dyersburg, Tennessee, and it's working out well. They're continuing to implement OBME. Once fully implemented, it will be the largest organization on the planet Earth to actually have an inventory of knowledge, skills, and abilities that they use in talent management decision making. So the progress is continuing now.
Fantastic. So you really have your finger on the pulse of education at a higher level. What are you seeing amongst, do you have any children? I didn't ask you that yet.
I have 5 kids and 8 grandchildren.
Oh my goodness.
Stretched from Portland, Oregon to Virginia, down to Texas and Alabama.
And so none of them are living at home any longer?
Oh, no.
Okay. So what are you seeing amongst the younger people today who are being educated that's different from the way you and I were educated in our era early on?
Well, I think educators, there are good educators and they're struggling. I think that one of the problems that educators have is everybody's been to school, so everybody thinks they know how to do education. So educators are constantly getting restrictions, advice, constraints, and restraints and curricula from central locations. That's extraordinarily problematic because education is a very personal thing. Learning science, cognitive science, how the brain learns, how we retain, hold information, employ that information over time, that's a very personal thing. And educators are adept at finding out how people learn and moving their curriculum in ways that help those people learn. Standardization works against that. So what I'm seeing is an increase in standardization, a decrease in imagination and innovation in learning is shortchanging learners, and learners are struggling on their own. A brilliant man I once knew said this to me. He said, the 2 things our colleges aren't teaching is they're not teaching students how to learn, and they're not teaching teachers how to teach. So when I took over a university, the first thing I created was a teacher and learning center to do exactly that. But we're not teaching our kids how to learn. We're not teaching our teachers how to teach those kids with different learning styles. We are now going to these set lists, this rote learning type of approach, which only works on a few people. And that gets into high versus low context learners. That's probably more than your listeners want to hear about. But we need to get back to empowering teachers in the classroom to work with children to maximize their learning capacity. And we need to press lifelong learning. The neuroscience that we have picked up over the last 25 years that talks about brain health and how your neural functions work, learning is like the fountain of youth. You continually learn, you're continually growing neurons. If you activate those neurons by learning new things, they hook into streams. That stream rewires the brain. A stroke, which is like a gallon of water poured on a circuit board, can shut down part of the brain, but a functioning brain can just rewire around that. And we're seeing now people are in these intellectual ruts. And because of those ruts, strokes are awful. They're life ending.
I mean, as we discussed, was a huge reader. I am worried that TikTok has eroded my brain to the point that I don't know. It's hard for me to focus on, like one page of a book. So I'm getting ready to have to delete all social media off of my phone, Zach, by the way.
This brings up an interesting question. I wanted to ask both of you guys about reading. Do you consider like listening to audiobooks with a book reading?
That's a good question. Go ahead, Matthew.
I do not,
Okay.
and the reason is if you come to my libraries, you'll find that the books are all written in. So
Hmm.
there's an interaction between my brain and the author's brain, which occurs in him giving me his words, him or her, and me giving my words back in the marginalia. That interaction doesn't occur. Now that said, I'm an Audible subscriber and I listen to books every night to sleep. And if I don't have a book playing in the background, I cannot sleep because I'll lay awake and think all night. Sir, I'll turn it over to you.
I am the same way. Like I was telling my wife the other day, I saw a TikTok where the person was doing something and it made their brain calm down. But I have like three or four dialogues going on in my head at one time. And so if I don't do something like that, like I listen to music when I sleep, but I listen to Audible. Right now, I've been listening to the Mark Twain biography by Ron Chernow that just came out. And it is really good. I'm really enjoying that. But yeah, I prefer books, but especially if I'm driving, I listen to podcasts nonstop. But a book, if I'm on a road trip, I'm getting ready to go on a long flight. I got to have a really good book to help me not go crazy from being strapped into a seat. What if Matthew, if somebody could only have one book about history, um, what would you recommend that they read? What is your favorite book about something historical?
Well, for me, Bernard Fall's book got me into history, so I always go back to Bernard Fall's book. And historians always hate that answer because Bernard Fall wasn't a historian; he was a journalist. But I would tell people, get the book that intrigues you. Find that person in history who interests you, that author who writes to you. But find something that talks to you, talks to your heart and your mind, because you want to engage both, and read that book, and read it for fun, and understand that these lives are just exciting and fun to read about.
Yeah, it's sometimes it's where you are in life and what's going on and how a book clicks. For me, I don't know if you've ever read James Swanson's Chasing Lincoln's Killer. That is my all-time favorite book. It's the only book I've probably read three or four times. It really spoke to me, and the way that he wrote, really inspired me. So that's my favorite. Tell me the name of that book again.
Street Without Joy.
Hey, I'm gonna buy that. I'm gonna buy a print copy, and I might
They're
read it
cheap.
on my
They
plane.
printed a lot of them. Yeah.
Okay, I wrote it down. Um, Zach, what's your favorite book?
I don't I don't read a lot. My
Oh,
book right now, I guess, is Good Night Gorilla.
I was just going to say
Reading
Goodnight
myself.
Moon. Goodnight Moon, maybe. Yeah, honestly, when that's what I meant when I said like during different eras, like when I had little kids,
Oh
oh
yeah.
my gosh, reading was the last thing you could do when you're trying
Um,
to work.
my daughter started kindergarten today, so we
Oh,
actually read the night before kindergarten last night. That was a nice book.
oh, congratulations. That's nice. She's going to really enjoy that. Are you nervous about her being
Uh,
the
no, no, she's beyond excited. We're just sad that she's growing up.
Oh, you ain't seen nothing yet, brother.
Oh,
So we're going to take a quick break, and when we get back, we're going to talk all about the Constitution and Matthew's upcoming series that he's going to be teaching.
With Final Flight Outfitters, you don't have to hunt for the world's best gear. The best of the best, selected by some of the world's best hunters, can be found in their Union City store, in their catalog, and online at finalflight.net.
I hope you're enjoying the Real Foot Forward podcast from Discovery Park of America. If you are, please be sure to subscribe, rate, and leave a positive review on iTunes, Spotify, or wherever you listen to podcasts. Our guest today is Dr. Matthew Stafford, retired Air Force officer, and we're going to be talking a little bit now about the Constitution. So, a lot of our listeners are not probably as familiar with the Constitution as they would hope that they were. Why don't you give us, if you don't mind, just a little bit of like a 1 minute overview of what the heck is the Constitution?
It's a charter for how the government should work, and it's not so precise and demanding that you don't have any leeway at all. But it lays out, and it's really easy to read, and it's really short, and that's what always confounds people is they say, I'm not going to go into this, I'll be there all day, and then you hand them a copy of the Constitution, the Declaration, and all the articles, and it's just this little tiny pamphlet. As a military officer, I tried to read it at least once a year because I swore an oath to uphold and defend it. But nevertheless, it is our national charter. It is our source document. It is from where all of our laws, all of our rules, and all of our governance flows.
And there are, you and I talked earlier about the museum and the where I used to work and the amendments and, the First Amendment. And anyway, so we touched, of course, on the Constitution at the museum, and we did a lot of work with the U.S. Constitution Center. And so I know a tiny bit, but I know there are 3 branches of government. Why don't you share a little bit of that? I think there was what was that electric company used to have a little cartoon about the branches of government.
Yeah, I'm a bill. I'm only a bill. I'm sitting here on Capitol Hill.
Yeah, I won't make you sing that, but
it's a great cartoon. It really covers it well. Yeah.
Share that with our listeners.
So the cartoon. Yeah. So Article 1. And it's interesting to get into the framers' mind. The Articles of Confederation are failing miserably. The foreign powers, particularly Britain and France, are trying to pull the Republic apart. They're turning us against each other. Some of the southern states are putting their militia on the border, threatening war with one another. So they realize they've got to do something. They've got to rewrite these articles because they're in such desperate shape. The economy is crashing. Everything's going wrong. So they go and they decide that they're going to have a conference and rewrite the Articles of Confederation. And almost immediately they realize it's not going to work. We can't rewrite this. We cannot salvage this mess. We're going to have to start from scratch. So in the middle of that hot summer, they close the doors and the windows and they go into this secret enclave and they start hammering out this new charter for America. We don't know what happens behind those closed doors until Madison's notes come out years and years later. But nevertheless, behind those closed doors, they have these values and these perceptions that they're trying to address. And first and foremost is that the people need to be in charge, that we, the people, is going to be their guiding light. It's going to guide them through everything that follows. And we, the people, are most directly represented through our Congress. So Congress will be Article 1, and it will be the supreme branch of government. Now, I know that's going to come as a shock to people today because it does seem like the executive branch has become supreme. The supremacy of the executive branch, that argument over the supremacy began with FDR in the 1940s, and we've heard about this imperial presidency ever since because we have seen the president rise in power. A lot of that, though, is because the legislator has passed that power to the executive branch. If we go back to the strict interpretation of the Constitution, the legislative branch is in charge. For instance, Article 1 is where we get the power for tariffs, not the president. Although if you watch the news any given day, you'll think, no, that's the president's power. That was passed from Congress to the president over a series of acts, most recently to the 1970s. Article 2 then is the executive branch, and they wanted an executive to be a manager. So you can look at that legislative branch as kind of the board of directors. It's making the big decisions. And then we have the CEO who's managing the company day by day. And then we have the legislative branch. And the Congress didn't know what to do, the framers didn't know what to do with the legislative branch. So it's the shortest of the 3 articles governing branches of government. And they basically said, we're going to let Congress sort it out. And Congress does. They pass a law, I think it's 1790, they come out with the act that's going to define how the courts are going to work. And we still live under that law. It was a brilliant law. It's one of the great things that Congress did for us is establish our judicial system. And then the idea that the Supreme Court can go and tell us what is and is not constitutional, that's not in the Constitution. That was an assumed power. Marbury versus Madison, they stepped up and said, hey, we don't think that's right. And they shouted, that's unconstitutional. And then they crouched down and looked and see if anybody noticed what they just did. No one did. A few years later, they did it again, and it became an inherent power of the Supreme Court to tell us what is and is not constitutional. So we have a charter that is the basis, the foundation for our government with these 3 branches of governance, but it is a charter that was always supposed to flex and to mold and to be a living document that would grow with the nation. If the framers were around today and they saw how little we have amended their Constitution, they would be shocked. Remember, we amended it 10 times in the first couple of years.
I'm curious, if you everyone probably throughout America's history feels like they're living in history. But do you feel like in a variety of ways, when you watch the news or read the news or whatever, do you feel like we're living through really unusually historic times?
The number one question you're asked as a historian is, and it's funny, no matter where you go, and I've been all over the world, has it ever been this bad? I've been asked that question now for 25 years. Has it ever been this bad? And I want to tell everybody, yes, it's been this bad and worse. People say, well, the economy's bad. No, the economy was worse. In this great stock market crash that led to the Great Depression, there were people who were in soup lines. They were, the unemployment was 75, something 90% in places. Have taxes ever been this high? Oh yeah, taxes were over 90% for some income groups, at points in our career. Have tariffs ever been this restrictive? Yeah, you probably heard about the smooth Harley tariffs. We have had problems in our past. What is amazing is our constitutional form of government and we, the people, can overcome those hurdles. So the challenges we have today are different, but they harken back to challenges we've experienced in the past. And we can look back to the past and say, how did we overcome those challenges then? We can overcome those challenges today. We have overcome America is a success story, and we've come a remarkable distance. When we go back to our framing, you find that it's white males over 21 who own property are we the people. Look at us now. We have younger people, we have people of color, we have women, and more and more. And the constitutional story is an amazingly positive story, and it always tends to go towards increased inclusivity, more and more people included in the political process, and whether you like it or not, increased individual rights.
Do you feel like, let me rephrase that. What do you feel like is the impact of immediacy in news and information, whether right or not, being delivered to us like a machine gun? Decades and decades ago, you had to get the newspaper, and the news was 2 or 3 days old, or listen eventually to the radio, where you got a little faster. But what is the impact of that on our government and on us as individuals?
I believe that the impact is counterintuitive. One would think it would drive people to do more, to be more involved. It's actually driving us towards apathy. We are so overwhelmed with information that people are just moving away from the entire political process. We're not voting in the numbers we used to vote in. We're not reading in the numbers we used to read. People get into their echo chambers and they find things that confirm their beliefs. We have a lot of voters who vote on one single issue only and don't want to know about those other stinking issues. And so it's driving us towards apathy. We're just so overwhelmed. And so people need to moderate, everything in moderation. They shouldn't stay in their echo chamber. They should get out and listen to other people's voices. And we should bring back civility, and we should bring back the art and science of mingling. Go out and meet your neighbors. It is so sad that I go to talk to people who do not know their neighbors. Get out and know your neighbors. Maybe we need more street parties, but we have got to know, because it is we the people. And if we the people only includes the people in our living room or just the people at our church, that's not we the people. We the people is all of us. And we have to start to know we the people so we can be we the people to make the massive decisions that we need to make to keep this union progressing.
So if you pull out your, I heard your cuckoo clock a while ago, if you move that aside and pull out your crystal ball, and look into the future, do you think we will return to a time when there's civility and where we can discuss issues without so much polarization in our conversations?
The arc of history is moving in a distinct way in our constitutional journey, again, towards inclusivity and individual rights. However, it always has pendulum swings back and forth. And those pendulum swings are always, if we go too far one way, we go too far the other way. So if you feel like we're going too far to the right now, guess what? It's coming. We're going to go too far to the left. because it's like a guitar string. Pull it back and it's going to vibrate and it's eventually going to set towards middle. In terms of our civility, though, I think yes. I think it has to get that way. And it has to get that way. Social media has moved us away from civility. In my church, I'm taking the book of James, and James is very careful to tell you should control your mouth, control your speech, control your words. And I tell my students in that class, he could just as well have said and control your mouse, because our keyboard and our mouse becomes our words, our tongue, and our mouths, and we need to practice civility. Civility to open that, but we have to teach civility. This is not a skill that we're teaching in our high schools anymore. We used to teach people how to engage in conversation. And so it's up to us as concerned members of our society to engage other people in this and to try to get them to talk. And that's what this group that's asking me to speak wants to do. They want people to come together to talk about important issues in an apolitical environment.
So it's scary when you think about how little we as Americans know about the Constitution, and know when we watch the news and when we come away with these big, bold opinions. And, when you read on TikTok or Facebook, all these powerful statements from people who sound like they would die with that opinion. And then you really know that they really don't understand sort of the core values of America. How do we fix that? Civic education and civic literacy. How do we solve that problem?
Well, first off, we as Americans, we the people, have to be educated. Thomas Jefferson told us that an uneducated populace would lose the republic. And so we need to be educated. We need to understand. Secondly, we need to get back to the idea that the people we elect work for us. Those people work for us. If those people are not meeting your needs, do not vote for them. And all of the statistical information we have, for reasons that elude me, we vote for incumbents. The incumbent. If you hire someone for a job and in 2 or 6 years or 4 years they have not done the job you wish them to do, why do you really want to give them another chance? Get someone else in there. As long as we're making progress, sure, you can reelect somebody. But I'm a big fan of term limits. But more than that, the voters are the term limits. Put a backstop on these people. They come to you with a campaign promise in year 1. They haven't started it in their second year, and they've only got 2 years. They're probably not going to start it. Or if they've started it and they're not going at the really good clip by the end of the 4th year, get somebody else in there. We have got to start rotating these people in and out of our government. That's what the framers intended. When Thomas Jefferson set up his school, University of Virginia, he proposed an academical village. And what he said, when people would ride their horses into his academical village there in Charlottesville, Virginia, they would learn what they needed to know, and then they would go home. That's how Congress should work. People should come in there, do what they promised to do what they need to do, and then they should go home and return to we the people so we can bring in other representatives. So the two things are knowledge, got to be informed, and second thing is be active in getting good politicians.
So your upcoming program, it's a 4-part series at MacIver's Grant Public Library. That is in Dyersburg, I'm assuming.
That's correct.
It's U.S. values and the Constitution. What would you define as U.S. values?
Well, we'll spend the first night talking about values. Values are the motivations for the rules we make for ourselves, the ways that we live, what guides us in our decision. And values are inculcated very deeply. We do not read books and learn values. Values are inculcated as we're growing up, and normally through a series of modeling. People model for us, and we say, I want to be like that person, or I definitely do not want to be like that person. And that gives us our values. Our framers had specific values. They had got those values through suffering through the horrors of the American Revolution, which are much more horrible than modern Americans realize. We tend to think of it as two armies, one dressed in blue, one dressed in red, standing up erect and shooting at one another. There's a lot more to it than that. And there's a lot of horror stories, people suffering, people starving. There's a lot going on in that time period. These people don't want that to happen again. And that's driving a lot of decisions they're going to make about this new government charter. So I want to explore the values we hold today, which are different. And the framers said they'd be different. And they said the Constitution would have to change to get there, and compare those to the values that are captured so well in that document. And then as we talk about the arc of the Constitution in the fourth week, as we move through that journey, you'll see how the values are changed through court decisions, through political movements, through social movements, through even amendments.
So the 4-part series is September 11th to October 2nd.
Correct.
Hopefully, folks are listening to this. Of course, this will be up forever, so they may have missed it. It's 2025 right now. But if you have time to go, I think it's going to be a fantastic series. Who came to you and said, "Hey, we want to do a series"?
There was, first off, I've done this in my professional career. I used to be invited by the head of agencies in the federal government to go and teach their senior executives about the Constitution, because these heads of agencies felt that some of their senior leaders had forgotten what they'd sworn an oath to protect and defend. So it was kind of a reminder, and they would spend a morning with me, and I'd go through this with them. So a group here found out about that, and they asked if I'd be willing to do this. Their motivation is what we just talked about, is civic awareness and a lack of civility. So they said, what could you do? And I said, well, I could do this. And I kind of laid out this 4-part series, and they said, yes. I think we've got a few sponsors now. I know that Discover Park has sponsored, Sonic, Maple Ridge. There's a number of sponsors.
Chick-fil-A sponsor?
I don't know.
It's good. They should sponsor. And so I don't have the time on here. What time is it going to begin?
They're going from 6 to 7 on Thursday nights, starting September 11th.
Oh my gosh, that's great, Zach. We could go to that.
Oh, pardon me. They're 5:30 to 6:30. 5:30
to 6:30. Okay, well, we can leave a little early from Union City and get there in time. I don't think I've ever been to the library there in Dyersburg.
Very nice library.
Yeah, I've heard that. There's some really great folks in Dyersburg. I really like that community. So what can people who make the drive 4 weeks? Jack and I are going to come. How do you think this will change us when the series is over? How will we be different?
I'm hopeful that you'll meet a couple new people that you'll want to talk to and continue the discussion. That's how I think that the best impact we can have, the best impact a teacher can have, is to get a kid to learn. And sometimes we don't learn what we're teaching. Sometimes they learn something else. But I want to start the learning journey and the conversational journey about the nature of governance in a civil manner, that we can talk to one another. And sometimes there'll be some name dropping. It happens in a conversation. And I'd urge people to not do that, to try to rise above the political flows, either right or left, and talk about the bigger issues. What does this represent? This morning, the president asked for a new census, an out-of-cycle census. So you may have an opinion on the president, you may have an opinion on the ask, but where should we start? We should start by looking in the Constitution and say, what does it say about the census? How does this request fit or not fit within that request? And then we should ask our elected leaders that, hey, why don't you just stick with the Constitution? It's a great document.
Fantastic. I am so grateful that you have settled here in Northwest Tennessee and that you're hosting this, and I am going to attend. I'm really looking forward to it. And I'm so grateful that you took a few minutes out of your busy day to spend with Zach and I.
Well, it's awful nice of you to host me. Thank you so much, Scott. Zach, appreciate you both.
And thanks to all you listeners who've joined us today at Discovery Park of America. Shout out to our friends over at Final Flight Outfitters for sponsoring today's episode. Our mission here is to inspire children and adults to see beyond. To plan an experience here for you and your family, visit discoveryparkofamerica.com.